Happy Wednesday, everybody. I'm Cassie, and I come on Facebook Live on Wednesdays to talk about my weekly blog posts. And this week, the blog post is all about decimals. So I thought it was a good time to share because my strategy that I use for decimals also goes really well with Halloween. So I'm going to talk to you about this strategy called the ghost decimal strategy and how you can use it in your class. And then I'm going to share with you some free resources that you can pick up right on the blog. Okay, so what is a ghost decimal and what is a ghost zero and how will it help your students? So I've been using this strategy so long that I can't remember exactly when it got started or what or how, if the students helped me come up with it. I don't really remember, but this is kind of how it goes. So decimals is one of those things that every year when I teach it, I think it's going to be easier for the kids to get than it actually is. And so I always start with, line up the decimal points, and then solve it as regular. But there comes all of these problems, and those are the problems, the same types of problems that kids fall for and make a mistake. And they happen to be the same kind of problems that you end up seeing on the tests and the STAR and the achievement tests and so forth. So I realized that kids needed to pay attention for these certain types of problems where they're most likely to mess up. And those are the types of problems to where there are different number of decimal places in each of the numbers that you're adding or subtracting or working with. So even though the kids knew what to do to fill in any gaps with zeros, they weren't doing it. They weren't really recognizing it. So I knew that I needed to do something to help the students pay better attention to this or to have these types of problems stand out. And so I just thought of a way that I would try to make it fun. And it made sense to call it a ghost decimal because the problems were always happening whenever the numbers needed a decimal point or trailing zeros and didn't have them. So I printed some examples of problems that are the most likely culprits to make kids mess up. So here's the first type of problem, and you see I have it lined up, but we have this gap, and the students always just want to write a 5 here. They do 5 minus 0, and it messes them all up. So what I tell them is that they need to add the decimal point or the 0 that should be there, and even though it's not there, and even though they can't see it, it really is there. And so that's what makes it a ghost. And so I tell the students, before you solve any of the problems, make sure that you haunt the problem. And just doing a little strategy like that, it makes the kids want to do it. It makes it more fun. It makes it a story or a game or something that they want to pay attention for. So even as they're writing their zeros to fill in the gaps, they say things like, ooh, like they're haunting the number. So yes, it's cheesy and it feels kind of dumb as an adult doing that, but for the kids, they love it and it sticks. Hey, Stephanie, thanks for coming back. Okay, so this is the first type of problem that kids will just inevitably miss. Now there's a problem that's even worse and it comes up even more often, and that is this type of problem where you have a whole number and you're subtracting a decimal. And again, especially if it's subtraction, kids just want to write the number here instead of subtracting from the 0. So this number is actually missing a decimal point, so it has a ghost decimal and ghost zeros. And so again, I just remind the students, look for any problems that you may need to haunt before you can solve them. And this is the kind. Now this kind also appears in another 4th grade skill, the problem solving skill, which I think is 4.8C. And that's the one where they have to solve problems that deal with money, because they always have problems where it's like, what's the change if you paid with a $10 bill? But they don't write the 10 with the 2 zeros, they just write 10. And so students really need to pay attention to when they are adding or subtracting with decimals, that they don't forget about those trailing zeros and those decimal points that may not look like they're there, but they are there. So that's what this week's blog is about, and I kind of showed you some subtraction, but the same type of skill works with in 5th grade when you start learning how to divide with decimals. And so a lot of times that happens even further as you convert fractions to decimals. So on the blog, there are some free activities that you can go download, and basically there's one that's a craftivity where the kids are going to make this little 3D ghost, but he got squished because I put him on the doorknob and closed the door and it squished him. But each side first is kind of like an interactive notebook, because it has some teaching, some anchor chart stuff, and then some practice. So there's this, and then there's, this is kind of what it looks like. And there's 3 different pages. But then there's another version too, if you're a 5th grade teacher, that you can use for dividing fractions. And also on the blog, there are just some practice worksheets. There's one for fractions and one for adding and subtracting. And there's also an idea for a game that you can play. And basically you just cut these into individual problems, and you can read about it on the blog at CassieNoack.com. Hey Cindy, yay! My sister just joined, who is also a teacher, but she teaches reading. Well, she's a reading specialist for elementary school. So sorry, Cindy, you're probably not going to love my math stuff. So anyway, and then one more thing I wanted to talk about real fast was that I had a few questions from people that were going to my blog, and they were subscribed to my teacher group, I guess you would say, where they get my emails. And but when they go to older blog posts before they subscribe, they weren't able to access the free resources. So I created a resource library on my blog that you can access, like the stuff to any of the old blog posts too. So if you're interested in those things. So yeah, if you're watching this back, if you have a question, you're free to put it in the comments and I'll answer it later whenever. Or if you have maybe a suggestion on what you do to help your kids to get better at working with decimals, because it does seem like it's an easy skill, but it is one of those skills that always proves to be a little bit more difficult than you think it's going to be. So anyways, that's it. Thank y'all for coming and for watching and for supporting me and my business, where I'm try to help teachers. And so I guess now I'm going to go back to watching the football game with my hubby. So y'all have a good night. Bye.